What's up guys, I'm J-Man, and let's talk about the movie series that gets so much hate and so much money, the Transformers series. Yeah, I'm really doing this. Definitely an interesting series to talk about, isn't it? Reviled by so many and yet popular enough to spawn 5 movies, all by the same director. Now, obviously these movies have received a lot of criticism, but there's actually one particular one that all of them have in common. It's basically the same predictable story several times over, just different ways of telling it. So why is that, do you think? Well, I have a theory. It's because they only listen to the fan criticisms and not the constructive ones. This is So I'll break these movies down like this. The first one is said to be the best out of the whole franchise. Even though it's still considered a pretty mindless movie itself, the story is said to be the most enjoyable out of all of them. Why? Because it kept things nice and easy. The simple story about a boy and his car. There's obvious government conspiracies, other colorful characters, but it all revolved around this teenage boy, the girl of his dreams, and his new car that he forms a bond with. The movie came out to a mixed reception at best, but it was a huge hit and a sequel was immediately greenlit. And when they were making the sequel, the fans responded with just one word. More. More robots, more mindless action, more useless characters. The writing can probably be blamed on the writer's strike at the time, not to mention the whole rushed production that the movie went through. But either way, they just thought the audience doesn't really care much about plot or thinking, and they'll just love anything that they throw in. So the movie was hated by both critics and audiences, and some even consider it to be a joke at this point. And yet, somehow, it made even more money. And how did Michael Bay respond to the harsh criticisms?
The take on the reaction to the film, well, I don't read the internet anymore, and I don't read critics. I think these critics were born with the anti-fun gene. They're missing what audiences really want, you know?
All critics are stiffs. That's how. But they only took the fan criticism to heart that they focused too much on the action and not enough on the story and characters. So they tried to do better at that with the third movie. The problem is they tried too hard with this. While definitely better than Revenge of the Fallen, it just seems kind of slow and dull in comparison to the first two. But again, they didn't care because it made even more money and the studio heads were basically bowing down at Michael Bay's feet thinking that he knows exactly what audiences want. So after that, they thought, they must want more, let's make another one. So they came out with a 4th movie with all new characters, more robots, and of course, more excuses to fight. It made a lot of money, but there was definitely signs of Transformers fatigue. Michael Bay himself even said during the brainstorming process for the 5th one that the franchise is going to die if they don't branch out with newer ideas. So they threw everything into the 5th movie. Medieval period piece, space epic, rom-com, family adventure, and because of this, the movie actually ended up being the worst financially out of all of them, even to the point where some questioned the future of the franchise at this point. Now there's one thing to take from all of this. As bad as their movies were received, it's technically not their fault. Well, sort of their fault, but not completely. It's mostly the fault of the fans and people who generally enjoyed them. Hollywood is a business after all, and they have to listen to the people that pay money to see their movies. In other words, we are their business. And if something does good business, then they assume that there's basically nothing wrong with it. And even if they were looking for things to improve, all they listen to is the fan criticisms. In my opinion, it's all about drawing a fine line between deciding what to change and what already works. Now, you could argue that it's already impossible to make a good movie out of robots that transform into various vehicles and the human characters that are really only there to enhance the robot characters. But either way, it all comes down to the intention behind the product. Are you trying to tell a good story, or are you trying to pander to your audience? Are you trying to have compelling characters and a flowing narrative, or are you just providing fan service? I guess we can all assume the latter with these movies, but the point that I want to make is I believe you should have a solid plan for your stories and characters. Movies are not about the audience, it's about the story. And it's not just this franchise alone, it's also other franchises that have suffered from fan pandering. X-Men 3, Spider-Man 3, the original Ninja Turtles movies, Justice League. All these movies that had great starts but gave in to harsh criticisms and suffered the consequences. And also, it's not just about having a solid plan, it's also about deciding who your target audience is. That way, you can receive the type of criticism that you need rather than taking advice from the lowest denominator. And the tricky part is, if your audience is too big and broad, then it's easy to confuse the useful criticism with the fan criticism, in which case, the solid foundation for your stories comes in and you can find an equal balance between entertaining the audience and maintaining a solid story. And heck, even if you did have a solid plan and your movies still don't do that well, all that matters is your integrity. You took pride in your vision. That's something that even the harshest critic could never take away from you. Now, it might be argued that the first 3 Transformers movies did have something of a foundation for their stories. It revolved around Sam Witwicky's life. The first one was about getting his first car. The second one, him starting college. The third, him getting a job and committing to the love of his life. However, the problem is the overall execution of these storylines. The movies want to be about these things, but they just end up taking a back seat to the actual plots of the movie. Sam always tries living his own life, but he always just gets thrusted into the storylines that it just kind of becomes an afterthought. At least in the first one, there was a better reason for it, because he's the descendant of an important figure, and in the end, he's even involved in the action and comes out the hero. So I guess you could argue that the first one at least made an effort to try to be something good. But the sequels is when they thought that the audience will love anything they put in, so they developed a kind of arrogance with their movies and made their movies longer, more expensive, and became a slave to their own fan criticism. It kind of begs the question, is it better to fail and have a coherent story, or succeed and have a messy story? I'm sure they might tell you the latter, but for me, I'd rather go with quality over spectacle. If it can be both, then all the better for it. But between the two, story and integrity definitely matters most. So those are my thoughts on the Transformers movies. Now tell me, what do you think about them? Can they be saved? Can we possibly have a good Transformers movie? Whatever you think, don't be shy, leave a reply. Also be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter and support me on Patreon. And if you like this video, you can like, comment, and subscribe to the J-Man.